Welcome to Wildflower, from Wildflower, Rooted and Reckless, the podcast where writer and storyteller Angela Walker creates space to bloom in the wildest places, sharing stories of grit, grace, and growth.
Welcome from Wildflower, Rooted and Reckless podcast. I am Angela Walker. We left off last week. It was my turn to take him home and to keep him safe. So at 19 years old, on January 26th, which was ironically his due date, we brought Cody home to start our life. The first few weeks were a little bit rough. He was on the hospital schedule, but really he was such a good baby, and he nursed and he just did normal baby stuff. I think a huge part of the ability to adjust to all of that was the fact that I was so young. I was able to just move along with it, just kind of go with the flow. That wasn't something I was great at, but I was able to kind of find that through that situation. That whole situation, from being pregnant to the diagnosis to the hospital stay, all of it, it had already changed me so much. I guess it just changed my perspective of what was important and what I really cared about. Things were pretty smooth sailing. I think the hardest thing his first year was starting to see his diagnosis. I had friends who had children around the same age, and they started to sit up by themselves. They started to roll over by themselves. They started to crawl. Cody wasn't doing any of those things. He was very much still an infant. Dad and I had moved out. We got in a place of our own. We were playing house for all intents and purposes. He was going to work. I was, I think, part-time. I brought Cody with me to work, which I was super fortunate to be able to do. I took him to his therapies and tried to figure out how to undo what had been done and to really understand it better. I found all kinds of things. I think really the mission for me was to fix Cody. I just couldn't wrap my head around this. I'm a fixer. I like to fix things. People mostly, I guess. So I couldn't fathom him not being able, period. I remember right after the meeting, Dad and I were sitting in the cafeteria at the hospital. We were obviously upset. And I had made a comment about wheelchairs being able to be on fishing boats or being able to take them fishing in a wheelchair, something like that. And Dad got so mad. He was so upset. He was like, he's not going to be in a wheelchair. He's going to overcome this. Like, don't even say that. Don't even say that. I think I was more in like trying to accept what it was and then make the best out of it. But also, that's my firstborn son. Of course, I'm thinking about him playing baseball. I had all the same dreams any other pregnant woman does. I dreamt of my son going fishing. I dreamt of my son playing baseball. I dreamt of him having girlfriends and getting married and having children and all the things, doing all the things. I wasn't ready to give up that dream. I remember at one point praying and just earnestly praying, God, either let him be so special that he doesn't know what he's missing out on in the world, or let him be able to do it. Just don't. The only thing I ask, is don't let him have to watch the world go on without him. Him being in a vegetative state where he doesn't even see the world going by was one thing, but him being able enough to see other kids having fun, driving, doing sports, doing things that he would want to do and not being able to do them just seemed torturesome. It seemed like torture. It was just unthinkable for me. I could not accept that. I could not be okay with that. And I went to work like the crazy people with the strings strewn across and stuff, trying to figure out like how to fix this, how to undo this, how to fix this. Therapies were an obvious thing. I will always, always, always advocate for therapy from a young age. If your child is young and your child, even if your child does not have any other symptoms, scenarios, anything else, if they're not meeting their milestones, talk to your doctor. Therapy is not a bad word. It is a great asset to children. It is so much better to start them when they're young than when they're old and they're trying to play catch up. Cody did all the therapies. He did physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, feeding therapy. He did horse therapy, equine therapy. He did aquatic therapy in the pools. If there was a toy that said it was for development, I bought it. We had early steps that came into the home and just helped with early education. I remember her name was Dee, and she would come. We would play with Cody and go through motions and movements and, check in with me and see how I was doing, because I was smiling and nodding and doing all the things so that I didn't have to deal with all the things. I just kept pushing through, and Cody just kept pushing through, and he was really incredible. It was very obvious very early on that he was not going to be in a permanent vegetative state. I looked into all kinds of alternative treatments. So the paternal side of the family had actually sent a prayer blanket or a prayer cloth. So what that is the congregation prays over it, and then they sent it to me, and then I would pin it to Cody. So basically the idea is that those prayers, that he's covered in them. And I mean, when I tell you I wasn't opposed to it, I wasn't opposed to really anything. I think other than like Pet Cemetery witchcraft type stuff, I was there for it. Let's try it. And I had found like a program in Budapest, but that was a little outside my scope. I had at the time learned about suit therapy. Suit therapy was something that the astronauts used when they came back from space. Basically, it's this suit that's connected by rubber bands, and everything you do is like times 10. From what I could understand, for Cody to learn something, he needed to do it like 100 times more than us. So if it took us 10 times of doing something to learn, it took him 1,000 times. Is that the right math? If it took him 10 times. So in this suit with these rubber bands, it was like every time he did a movement or did something, because of the resistance, it was like doing it 500 times, right? The catch was it cost like $10,000. So I went to work on it. First thing I needed was clearance from his neurologist. So I went to the neurologist, and he told me no. He told me that no amount of praying and no amount of alternative therapies were going to change anything, and that he wasn't going to allow me to waste that kind of money on false hope. So we found a new neurologist, and that became a thing too. Oh man. So we needed to come up with a lot of money, and the next session was going to be starting. And so we did. We held garage sales, community garage sales. Basically, community members donated stuff for us to sell at the garage sale. And we were able to get on the news and tell the news what was going on, and they put out stories. It was in the newspaper. We orchestrated a fishing tournament with the local fishing club, and that was really neat. A lot of our friends participated in that, and that was really cool. I actually left with Cody from that fishing tournament and drove straight down to Miami, where I lived for 3 weeks with Cody while we went through this rigorous program. So 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, for 4 hours a day, 8 to noon, we did rigorous therapies. And then in the afternoon, we had take homes that we would work on at home, or in my case, a long-term stay hotel. Cody was about 15 months old when we went. He could barely hold his head up during like tummy time. He could not sit on his own. He had like really no core strength. We were there for 3 weeks. When we left, Cody could sit on his own. He could sit in a high chair at a restaurant. He could sit in a shopping cart. These are things that you didn't really think about until you could do them. He could get up on all fours and start to rock back and forth. And he had even started to get balance in standing. And because this was an alternative therapy at the time, there was no insurance to cover it. That was it. It was out of pocket. You had to pay cash out of pocket. And so I am so grateful to every single person who donated for that. Every person who bought something from that garage sale, every person who participated in that fishing tournament or sent a check into that PO box. I am so grateful for every single one, because it was through them that we were able to go to that program, and that changed everything. It changed everything. Not only did it obviously jumpstart him into the right direction, but it also made everything possible. So all the things that were impossible suddenly became possible, right? Like, he's doing all the things people are saying he can't do, he's not going to do. He's doing them. And that was incredible. It was incredibly encouraging. Also, the people I met while I was there in Miami, it was eye-opening. A lot of them were more established and older than me, and so they were able to tell me their experiences and navigating life with a child with special needs and how to work the system. As weird as that sounds, I mean, it is a sad, sad system. When it comes to children with special needs, it is a sad, sad system. And everybody asks the same thing. Well, why didn't you sue the hospital? Well, honestly, I tried. To be perfectly honest with you, I tried to sue the hospital. I didn't need any kind of exponential amount of money. I just wanted to know that if something were to happen to me tomorrow, Cody would be taken care of for his life, at least his medical, and whoever was caring for Cody would be taken care of so that they could do that appropriately. The thing is, there's germs in hospitals, and you sign a lot of those rights away. But because of so many fraudulent cases and so many people suing for BS, basically, it has made it so hard for people who probably should be able to have some sort of compensation or leg up financially in life. So ultimately, the hospital responded appropriately. They caught the fever. They gave him Tylenol. They started his antibiotics. Like, they followed the proper procedure. The truth of the matter is, the bacterial infection that Cody got was called bacillus. I learned through this that when you get sick, like back in the day when they would say, I've got a cold in my elbow, that's like a real thing. Okay. So germs, virus, bacteria typically have places they prefer, right? In your respiratory system, in your stomach, in your sinuses. There's just areas that they prefer that work better for them, like for growth. And sometimes, though, it doesn't work out. Sometimes they don't end up in your stomach. I had mentioned that the bacterial infection is typically found as a stomach flu. Well, there's a little more to that. So bacillus bacteria is outrageously rare. I forget the exact statistics, but it's like 1 out of some million that infants under the age of 2 months ever contract this bacteria, because it is typically found as a stomach flu in adult cancer patients. So meaning that people with cancer are more susceptible to this bacteria, and it typically presents as the stomach flu in people with cancer. When I spoke to the attorneys and we really started digging into things, and I spoke to their investigators, and where things really came down to, it was most likely cross-contamination from most likely a nurse. And so it would have become what I would consider a witch hunt. If that is the case, if there is a nurse who has or had cancer, whether or not she knew she was sick, I don't want to know. I don't want to know who she is. I like believing that she did not know that she was sick. I want to believe that she didn't call out of work because she didn't know yet. I also couldn't imagine putting that amount of guilt on someone. I know how I would feel if I found out that something I did, even unintentionally, caused such irreparable damage to somebody's life, to an entire family's life. I just couldn't. I just couldn't. That was the end for me. That was it. I didn't want to know anymore. And so that's where it ended. For me, what mattered the most was that Cody was alive and Cody was thriving against all odds, against all prognosis. Cody was thriving and he was happy. His smile, I to this day, if you know Cody, you know his smile. To this day, I have to giggle at that doctor saying we'd be lucky to see him smile, because honestly, you'd be lucky to see Cody not smile. And that's been forever. His smile has been there for as long as I can remember. That smile has carried he and I and strangers through things unimaginable. And that's what I had to focus on. Now that I had this hope from this intensive therapy and I saw what Cody can do, it was on. It was on like Donkey Kong. We were about to do the dang thing. But first we had to get through a little family shakeup. When I got back from Miami, Dad and I were actually engaged. We had postponed our wedding because of the intensive therapy. When we got back, that chapter of life came to an end. And we went on a car ride and we just weren't the same people. He probably said it best when he said we were like oil and water and we would just never mix. So I packed my stuff up and I moved back to my parents' house. And my parents are saints. At this point, I was 20 years old.
Wildflower,
Cody was
Rooted and Reckless
probably around 18
production
months old.
Angela Walker.
And
Catch
I
Wildflower
was
drops
now
on
a
Tuesdays,
single mom
Rooted on
of
Wednesdays,
a special
and Reckless
needs
on Thursdays.
child
Subscribe wherever you listen.
living with my
Stay
parents.
wild, stay rooted,
And
stay
that
reckless.
is where we're going to end for today. So tune in next week as we dive into the next chapter.
You've been listening to a Wildflower Rooted and Reckless podcast production with Angela Walker. Catch Wildflower drops on Tuesdays, Rooted on Wednesdays, and Reckless on Thursdays. Subscribe wherever you listen. Stay wild, stay rooted, stay reckless.